Welcome to our French Collection podcast, a go-to podcast for everything French. Hosted by me, Annette Charlton, with guests, candid insights into living in France, travel discussions and more. Our show will transport you to the land of cheese and croissants. So now let's dive into our next episode. Hey, welcome, bonjour, welcome to another episode from me, Annette Charlton, from a French Collection. It's been some time actually since I've sat in front of my microphone and recorded a podcast for you. Life has been crazy busy in a really good way. So a little bit about me if you don't know too much. I live in Australia and I also live in France. So I have homes in Australia, in New South Wales, and I have a home in Brittany, France. So travelling backwards and forwards between my two homes has taken up a significant amount of my time. Some maintenance work and minor renovations just cannot be managed from a distance, and so I've needed to be in France. So I've been spending typically 3 months at a time over there. Really excited now that I have two identical podcasting stations in both home. Podcasting station is a fancy way of saying that I have the equipment that I need in two of my small little offices. So now I'm set up to podcast in both locations, which is going to see much more regular podcasting from me. So great to be behind the microphone. Great to be sharing a bit more of France with you. Maybe you follow me on socials, jump over to, if you don't, go and check out what I do, backwards and forwards, lovely photos of France and my little village that I live in. All socials are a French Collection, as is the blog. So lovely to have you join me, and hopefully we will do more together. So today I have a great podcast prepared for you about Mont Saint-Michel. It's super relevant because Mont Saint-Michel this year is celebrating its 1,000-year birthday. I mean, significantly, where does that happen other than in France and Europe to have a building and a location with so much history? Australia is such a young country in comparison that I'm always amazed at the immense amount of history that you can find as you travel through France. So Mont Saint-Michel, happy birthday, 1,000 years. I mean, what do you think of when someone says, oh, Mont Saint-Michel or, the Abbey? It's in the region of Normandy, which you may or may not know, which is close to the region where I live. I'm in Brittany. You will have most likely seen photographs with its high rock dwellings and maybe photos of the tides coming in and going out, the peaceful grazing sheep. I mean, it just looks incredible. It's a stunning sight and it draws many of us to go and visit it. Even the people in the Middle Ages, they believed that Mont Saint-Michel was pretty special. They firmly believed it was a representation of heavenly Jerusalem on earth, an image of paradise. It was. And I think actually some of us would agree with it when we've seen the photos of the sun setting and the sheep in the background and the calm that seems to settle as the sun sets or the sun rises over the marshes. I think it looks quite a bit like paradise. What do you think? Situated on the border of Normandy and Brittany, if you were to go and explore it yourself, you might consider staying centrally in Rennes. Now, Rennes is the capital of Brittany. It's about an hour and a half train ride from Paris. You can always stay in the area around the island, but Rennes is also another option. Just putting it out there for you, that might work. You can also catch buses or you can hire a car to drive to Mont Saint-Michel if you are wanting to base yourself in Paris and head out for the day. So it's Rennes is an hour and a half train ride from Paris, and from Rennes you can catch a bus or you can drive yourself to the island. It will take you about 1 hour. You could also stay fairly locally at Saint-Malo. Saint-Malo is about an hour away, an hour drive. That's another stunning walled coastal town of the region. So Another option, again, is to stay on the island itself. And that way you'll enjoy the peacefulness that descends down once the crowds have left, the shopkeepers have gone home, or they're slowly packing up for the day. This quietness descends on the island, and I've been fortunate enough to experience that a couple of times, and it's the best way I like to visit the island. You can then walk the streets, sometimes almost on your own. You can stand around on the rampart walls, and you can look over the terrace and you can watch the sunset. It really is quite a spectacular day, a way to end the day in this UNESCO World Heritage listed site. So the island is made up of the old town and the Abbey. The old town has homes. That's right, people actually live on the island. There are homes, shops, cafes, there's the winding paths, the flights of stairs. There's also small private gardens which are attached to people's homes. And of course, some of those you can see as you're walking through the narrow lanes and up the flights of stairs. Just to let you know that this webinar, I prepared this webinar for the International Media Group, France Media Group, and it was really well received by their listeners and their followers, and I've got all of the information in a blog post, like show notes for you over on the website, so you might like to check that out at afrenchcollection.com. So I'll also be sharing with you some practical details of where to stay, where you park your car, and things that you would like to know should you be planning a visit to the island and to go and see the Abbey. The Bay of Mont Saint-Michel, where the island is, it's been prone to silting up over the last couple of centuries, together with man-made activities including farming and the building of a causeway to the mount for tourists, all added to the problem. Due to a major conservation project, they decided back in 2015 they would help restore the island status to Mont Saint-Michel. The main river into the bay, the Couston, has now been left to flow freely so that sediments are washed out to sea, and there's a footbridge. It's replaced the former causeway. So this lets the sea come in and it more fully surrounds the island, and particularly at high times it surrounds the whole island. Now, did you know that the tides in the Bay of Mont Saint-Michel are commonly known as the most powerful tides in the world? The sea travels at an incredible 15 kilometres between its lowest point and Mont Saint-Michel, which is deep in the bay. This happens about 4 times a day, so it's a massive expanse for the water to cover. And that means that the water is almost constantly in motion. The tides can rise and fall by as much as 13.5 metres. I mean, heck, that's a lot. If you've ever done any sailing, you'll understand that these tides are of phenomenal height. The mount dates back to about 1708, when Abbey, Bishop of Orange, had a sanctuary built on Mont in honour of the Archangel. The location soon became a major focus of pilgrimage. In the 10th century, the Benedictines settled in the Abbey, while a village grew up below its walls. The village kept growing so much that by the 14th century, the village extended as far as the foot of the rock of the island. It was also a stronghold during the Hundred Years' War, and it's an incredible example of military architecture, even though it wasn't built originally with a military purpose. So during feuds with the English, the ramparts and fortifications were strong enough to resist all the English assaults. And this is actually how the mount grew into a symbol of national identity. Now, I didn't know until recently, that the mount was a formidable prison during the French Revolution. Religious communities were expelled by Napoleon Bonaparte off the island to accommodate the revolution's prisoners. Later then, the island was classified as a historic monument. That was in 1874. And then it underwent major restoration work. And it's actually been undergoing regular work since then. I was over at the staying on the island about 6 weeks ago. There was some minor restoration work being done. Listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO since 1979, the Abbey is quite unique. It's not like any other monastery because it had to be built around the pyramid shape of the mount. The buildings are wrapped around the granite rock and they're built to very precise technical calculations. On the ground floor, the narrow side aisle of the cellar acts as a buttress. And above that, the supports of the first 2 stories are stacked on top of each other. Finally, the buildings get progressively lighter towards the top, and the outside of the building is supported then by big, powerful buttresses. Understanding that the layout and architecture of all the buildings was influenced by the guiding principles of monastic life and the constraints of topography is quite important when you look at it. The rule of Benedict is what the monks of the Mount observe, and it dictates a life with days devoted to prayer and work. So therefore, the Abbey is designed around that purpose and obviously around the topography of the rock. The rooms are organised around the 2 daily activities of prayer and work and the principle of an enclosed order. Space was also exclusively reserved for the monks to respect this principle of the enclosed order. In keeping with that, the rooms on the ground floor and first floor of the Merville were set aside for receiving the laity. So just in case you're not sure what laity means, I checked the definition in Wikipedia, which states, in religious organisations, the laity consists of all members who are not part of the clergy, usually including any non-ordained members of religious orders, for example, a nun or a lay brother. The monks of the Abbey observed the rule of Benedictine, stipulating the life of prayer and work, and that is still observed by Benedictines as well as other orders today. So actually, as far as the Abbey is concerned, there are 12 main areas that are open to you and I, and you'll find them as you walk upwards, climb upstairs, and you generally wind your way upwards and then downwards through the buildings. There's a guard room, which is a fortified entrance. This is where visitors would pass through to get into the Abbey before they would climb the grand stairs up to the terrace. Now, if you've been to this part or you plan to go to this, there are lots of stairs, so be prepared for many, many stairs. Some of the buildings between the church and the Abbey date back to the 14th and 16th century, and they were the stately residence of the abbots, where the abbots lived. The west terrace is where you'll get the most spectacular views of the bay. You need to look outwards and you'll be able to see the tides. There's often seagulls and birds flying around, crows. You'll see the birds. And if you look upwards, you'll see the neo-Gothic spire of the church tower. And then on top of that is the gilded copper statue of Saint-Michel. So the main part of the Abbey, it's referred to as the Abbey Church, and it was constructed literally on top of rock. It sort of spans about 80 metres over the sea, and it's built over quite a huge 80-metre platform. It has a nave, which is covered with a wood-panelled barrel vault, which is actually over 3 levels. There's arches, galleries, and tall windows. Maybe you've heard of cloisters as part of the buildings in an abbey. Well, Mont Saint-Michel has a cloister too. It's a connection between the various buildings, and it was used for prayer and meditation. The cloisters are also used for processions, or were used for processions during religious festivals. The cloisters appeared to be built light in weight because they're on top of so many other heavy levels. And one of their clever features is that the double row of small columns, whichever way you're looking through the columns, you'll get a slightly ever-changing view. It's really quite extraordinary. So these cloisters are where you'll need to climb up to the top of the building called the Merville, built in the 13th century. Under the cloisters is the Knights' Hall, which, as well as being built to hold up the cloisters, was where the work and study room of the monks were. The refectory was where the monks ate their meals, while they adhered to the rule of silence, except for the one monk who was giving the reading from the pulpit as everybody else ate. Back down the hill, directly beneath the refectory, is the large guests' hall, and that was the hall that was used for receiving royalty and nobility. Coming further down the hill, crypts were often designed to support the weight of the church or a chapel above, and it's the same at this abbey. The great pillared crypt supports the Gothic chancel of the Abbey church, and the Saint Martin crypt, built early in the year 1000, is the foundation for the south arm of the transept of the Abbey church. The Archangel Michael, why is he chosen? Why is it his sculpture that shines in gold above the top of the spire? Well, he's the head of the heavenly militia, and he was of great importance to medieval religious worship. In fact, to the medieval man living, you've got to remember, medieval man or women, they lived in expectation and dread of the hereafter. And it was Saint Michael who was the one who led away the dead, and he put their souls in the balance on the day of the last judgment. So he was very important to their way of thinking. And at about the time, around about the year 1000, many churches and chapels were dedicated to this saint, and they were built all over Europe, and they were often perched on top of hills or promontories. The reverence given to him was also deepened because of the way that Mont Saint-Michel was able to successfully hold out to the English. Because they were able to hold out to the English, he was seen as being able to be the warlike angel who could fight. So today you can see, if your eyesight's really good, maybe you've got a camera that's got a telescopic function. I would use that to zoom in to see the statue of the saint. He's on top of the belfry, on top of the spire. It's very high up, so zoom in the best you can. And sometimes if you are there and the sun is shining, it'll almost look like it's glowing when the sun hits it. It's quite an amazing sight. Emmanuel Fromet was the sculptor commissioned by architect Petitgrand, who thought that this statue would be suitable as a crowning glory for the 32-metre steeple. And I think everybody that sees it really is in awe. In the old town, there's gift stores, cafes, restaurants. There's even a post office, so you can post a letter, because there are residents that live on the island. So while they have a post office, most of their other everyday duties are done off the island. There's museums on the island that you can go and see as well. There's a museum dedicated to knights and how the knights lived. With lots of people on the narrow lanes in the old part of the town, of course also in the Abbey, you might not actually see that there are these museums to visit. Jump online, have a look, maybe buy your ticket ahead of time if you don't want to miss out, and you'll see what days and hours they're open. So there's more information of that in the show notes. There's a historical museum. That's about the monks who built the Abbey, the prisons, the periscope that discovered the bay, collection of ancient weapons, torture instruments, and a person sinking in the quicksand. There's also the iron cage of Louis VI. There's a state-of-the-art museum. It's dedicated to the history of the tidal island. Because the tides are quite extraordinary, it takes you through the evolution of the life and culture of the island, particularly with it having its UNESCO World Heritage Site listing. The Museum of the Knights is what has interested my boys when they were younger. So there's the armies of the King of France. There's a mock bridal suite. There's period furniture, chastity belt, armour, and there's an astrology cabinet. And it's just quite interesting to go and have a look at that. Best to get tickets. This is the practical information. Best to get tickets to the Abbey. You can chance turning up and buying a ticket on the day. Much better to have pre-purchased a ticket. You can also pre-purchase your audio guide, which will help you understand more about it. Now, if you're going to arrive by shuttle bus or by walking, you'll need to plan that before you actually get there. So, if you're going to arrive by car, there is a lot of parking. And all the car parks clearly show the way to the tourism centre and then clearly show the way to the island. As soon as you get out of your car, you can either follow the signposts or you can follow the people. It really doesn't matter when you go to the island. There's most likely going to be other people. The shuttle buses to the island are free. You can also pay to go on a horse-drawn carriage, or you can walk the last few kilometres via the footbridge to the island. I'm not sure if you knew, but the specially devised shuttle buses, they're called the passeurs. And I would recommend that you allow 45 to 60 minutes from parking your car to walking through the gates on the island, particularly in summer or on weekdays when school groups turn up for excursions. It can significantly take a lot longer to get onto a shuttle bus to make your way to the island. So do allow that time, particularly remembering that the last admissions to the Abbey are about an hour prior to closing. If you want to explore the bay, do keep in mind that the tides of the channel, they change very, very quickly. During high tide, the island looks quite surreal. It looks as if it's like hovering above the water, and in the right light, it creates this impressive mirror reflection. You might have seen photos on Instagram or on the net with this incredible reflection. I find that low tide is just as interesting, with the stone walls rising sharply from the flat sand. At low tide, you can walk around the perimeter and then you can look at it from a completely different vantage point. This can be a bit dangerous though, if you are not aware of the tides. So if you're going to take a long walk on the flat sands, it's best to book a tour with a professional guide. Now you'll see lots of groups that go on walks with professional guides. They are very familiar with the tides and can safely navigate the water. My top tip, if you plan to go on one of these walking tours, take a small microfiber towel or similar and a bottle of water. That way you can wash the sand off your feet, and then you'll stop yourself from getting blisters when you put your shoes back on with sand all over your toes, because if you're then going to do a lot of walking, that could be quite bad in creating blisters. Expect crowds, particularly in summer, school holidays, and on weekends, especially long weekends. But understanding that it's such an important place to visit, don't let the crowd stop you from enjoying Mont Saint-Michel yourself. In summer, you could choose to visit at the end of the day. This is another tip. The parking rate is reduced from 7 p.m. and the Abbey and different parts of the old town can remain open till quite late. So it might be your choice that you explore it with slightly less crowds and in the evening summer weather. So just an option for you there. You can also get to the mount by riding your bike. There are green paths for bike riding, designated bike routes, and they're on former railway lines. So these railway lines and bike paths mostly keep you away from busy roads and towns, and they're pretty clearly signposted. So jump onto the show notes, the blog post, and you'll be able to get a link for more information on the bike paths and how to get to Mont Saint-Michel that way. So there's also some really cool things about the number 8. Number 8 is quite closely associated with Mont Saint-Michel. I didn't know that myself. So everything began in the 8th century with the apparition of Saint Michael, who is the highest ranked in the celestial hierarchy. In the Middle Ages, pilgrims named the Mont the 8th wonder of the world. And I understand that. I mean, yeah, the 8th wonder of the world. And the famous Madame Poulard, who created La Mer Poulard restaurant and hotels, she started her restaurant in 1888. And her cookies that are still produced today, you can purchase them at airports, you can purchase them in Paris, you can purchase them at her hotel and her restaurant. They still have the date stamped into them as a bit of a homage to the number 8. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about Mont Saint-Michel. Do jump onto the blog post where there are links to the hotels to visit, the Tourism Office of Normandy, the Tourism Office of Mont Saint-Michel, and some cafes, and also the museum so that you can purchase tickets. And go and enjoy Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy when you're next in France. And let me say again that I'm so excited to have been able to share this incredible destination as it celebrates its 1,000-year birthday, particularly because I've gone to visit it and stay on the island again as I celebrated the birthday of Mont Saint-Michel. And so that brings us to the end of another podcast and our time together. Thanks for listening. I've really enjoyed your company, and I look forward to sharing more on France and all things French with you next week. Until then, you can head over to the blog at www.afrenchcollection.com for the full blog post. And so it's merci from me and à bientôt.